Picture this. You're sitting in a dimly lit room, late at night, scrolling through your phone. Maybe you stumbled across something, an image, a thought, a memory that sent a jolt of desire through your body. And then, almost immediately, came the guilt, the shame, the voice that whispered, "Spiritual people don't feel this way." I've been there. We've all been there. But what if I told you that Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in psychology and spirituality, saw lust not as something to be ashamed of, but as a doorway. Not a sin to be buried, but a shadow to be understood. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will completely shift how you see desire, spirituality, and the very essence of what it means to be whole. See, we've been taught that spirituality means transcendence, rising above, leaving the body behind. Lust? That's the enemy. Carnal, base, something to be conquered on the path to enlightenment. Churches condemn it. Self-help gurus tell you to transmute it, and spiritual communities? They pretend it doesn't exist at all. But Jung saw through that lie. He understood that the thing we push down into the darkness, the desire we refuse to acknowledge, doesn't disappear. It grows. It festers. It becomes the shadow, that part of ourselves we refuse to see, the impulses we deny, the hungers we pretend we don't have. And here's the kicker. The shadow doesn't just contain our bad parts. It holds our vitality, our creativity, our life force itself. Lust isn't the opposite of spirituality. According to Jung, denying lust is what blocks your spiritual growth. Think about that for a moment. Every major religion, every wisdom tradition, has spent centuries trying to control, suppress, or eliminate sexual desire. Meanwhile, Jung, who studied alchemy, mythology, Eastern philosophy, and the depths of the human psyche, arrived at a radically different conclusion. The energy you're trying to kill is the very energy that could set you free. This isn't about indulging every impulse or throwing morality out the window. This is about integration, about becoming whole, about understanding that the person who denies their shadow becomes controlled by it, while the person who faces their shadow learns to dance with it. And that dance? That's where real spirituality lives. So if you've ever felt torn between your spiritual aspirations and your human desires, if you've ever wondered why you can meditate for hours, but still feel that pull, that ache, that undeniable hunger, this video is for you. Because we're about to explore what Jung really said about lust, the shadow, and the surprising path to wholeness that nobody talks about. Forget everything you've been told. The truth is so much more interesting. Before we dive deeper into lust specifically, we need to understand Jung's revolutionary concept of the shadow. Because without this framework, nothing else makes sense. Carl Jung believed that the psyche, your inner world, is not a single, unified self. Instead, it's a collection of different parts, some conscious and some unconscious. The persona is the mask you show the world, polite, acceptable, curated. But beneath that mask lives the shadow. Everything you've been taught is unacceptable, everything you've repressed, everything you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. And here's what most people miss: the shadow isn't just negative traits. It contains all the parts of you that didn't fit the story you were supposed to live. Maybe you were raised to be agreeable, so your anger lives in the shadow. Maybe you were taught that ambition is selfish, so your drive lives in the shadow. And yes, if you were told that sexual desire is shameful, dirty, or sinful, then your lust lives in the shadow too. Jung was obsessed with the idea that wholeness, what he called individuation, requires you to confront the shadow. Not to destroy it, but to integrate it. To bring what's unconscious into consciousness. To face what you've been running from and reclaim the energy you've been using to keep it buried. Because here's the thing about repression. It takes enormous psychic energy to keep parts of yourself locked away. That's energy you could be using to create, to love, to grow. Instead, you're using it to maintain a prison inside your own mind. Now, let's talk about lust specifically, in Jungian terms. Lust is a manifestation of libido, but not in the Freudian sense. Jung redefined libido as psychic energy, life force, creative power. It's the energy that drives you toward growth, connection, creation. Sexual desire is one expression of this energy, but it's not the whole picture. When Jung studied world religions and mystical traditions, he noticed something fascinating. The ones that tried to completely suppress sexuality often produced the most sexually obsessed, neurotic followers. The monks plagued by impure thoughts, the priests caught in scandals, the spiritual seekers who spent more energy fighting their desires than actually becoming enlightened. Why? Because you can't kill the shadow. You can only make it more powerful by refusing to look at it. Jung saw lust as a natural, powerful energy that contains both destructive and creative potential. Left unconscious and unexamined, it controls you. It becomes compulsion, addiction, shame, secrecy. But when you bring it into consciousness, when you face it with honesty and curiosity, something remarkable happens. It transforms. This is where Jung parts ways with both religious suppression and modern sex positivity that says anything goes. He's not saying repress it or indulge it. He's saying integrate it. What does integration look like? It means acknowledging the desire without being ruled by it. It means understanding the symbolic and psychological meaning behind your attractions. It means asking not how do I make this go away, but what is this energy trying to tell me? Because lust, in the Jungian view, is rarely just about sex. It's often about the hunger for aliveness in a numbed-out life, the longing for union with parts of yourself you've disowned, the projection of your own undeveloped qualities onto another person, the creative, generative life force seeking expression. When you feel intense sexual attraction, Jung would ask, what quality does this person embody that you need to develop in yourself? When you feel shame about your desires, he'd ask, whose voice is that shame speaking in? When you're caught in cycles of compulsion, he'd ask, what wound are you trying to fill? This is why Jung said that the meeting with oneself belongs to the most unpleasant things that can be avoided, so long as one can project everything negative onto the environment. We'd rather blame our desires, demonize our impulses, or project our shadow onto others than face the uncomfortable truth. We are more complex than we want to admit. Spirituality, in the Jungian sense, isn't about becoming pure or perfect or transcendent. It's about becoming whole, and wholeness includes the shadow. Wholeness includes lust. The spiritual path isn't up and away from the body, it's down and through it, into the depths, into the darkness, into everything you've been taught to fear about yourself. And on the other side of that descent, freedom. Not the freedom of having no desires, but the freedom of no longer being controlled by the desires you refuse to acknowledge. That's the untold truth Jung discovered. Not that lust is good or bad, but that it's powerful. And like all powerful things, it requires consciousness. Let's get real about what happens when spiritual seekers try to transcend lust without ever actually facing it. Because this is where things get messy, and where Jung's insights become painfully relevant. There's a term in modern psychology called spiritual bypassing, coined by psychologist John Wellwood. But Jung saw this pattern decades earlier. It's the use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with unresolved psychological issues, painful feelings, and developmental tasks. And nothing gets bypassed more than sexuality and desire. You've seen it. Maybe you've done it. The person who meditates for hours but can't have an honest conversation about intimacy. The yoga teacher who posts about divine love while secretly scrolling dating apps at midnight, filled with shame. The spiritual influencer preaching detachment while being completely ruled by hidden compulsions. Jung would say they're not transcending lust, they're repressing it. And repression always comes with a cost. Here's what actually happens when you try to deny or rise above your sexual nature without integrating it. First, the energy goes underground. It doesn't disappear, it becomes unconscious. And when psychic energy is unconscious, it runs you. You might think you're above desire, but meanwhile, you're making life decisions based on attraction you won't admit, avoiding situations that trigger you, or projecting sexual energy onto safe spiritual concepts like kundalini or divine union, without ever addressing the actual human desire underneath. Second, you split yourself in two. There's the spiritual you who meditates and reads sacred texts, and there's the shadow you who has desires and impulses. These two can't talk to each other. You become fragmented, living in a civil war inside your own psyche. Jung called this a dissociation, a split in consciousness that prevents wholeness. Third, the shadow grows more powerful. Whatever you refuse to acknowledge gains power in the unconscious. This is why you see spiritual leaders caught in sex scandals, priests abusing children, gurus manipulating students. It's not despite their spiritual practice. It's often because they used spirituality to avoid facing their shadow. The more you repress, the more distorted the energy becomes. Jung was fascinated by the alchemical traditions precisely because they understood this. Alchemy wasn't really about turning lead into gold. It was about transforming the base elements of the psyche into consciousness. And the alchemist knew you had to work with the prima materia, the raw, messy, impure stuff. You couldn't skip to enlightenment. You had to go through the darkness. When Jung worked with clients, especially those on spiritual paths, he noticed a pattern. The ones who were trying hardest to be pure were often the most psychologically stuck. Their dreams were full of sexual imagery, shadow figures, and chaos. Why? Because the psyche was trying to compensate. It was sending up flares saying, "You can't ignore this part of yourself forever." One of Jung's most powerful ideas is that the unconscious seeks balance. If your conscious identity is all light, all purity, all transcendence, then your unconscious will fill with darkness, earthiness, and desire. Not because you're failing spiritually, but because the psyche demands wholeness. Think about the saints who were tormented by demonic visions of sexuality. Jung would say, those weren't demons. That was their own shadow trying desperately to be seen, acknowledged, integrated. The more they fought it, the more it intensified. This is the trap so many spiritual seekers fall into. They believe that having lustful thoughts means they're not advanced enough, pure enough, enlightened enough. So they double down on practices meant to purify them. More meditation, more fasting, more prayers for deliverance. But Jung would ask, what if the thoughts aren't the problem? What if the problem is your relationship with the thoughts? Here's the radical shift. You don't need to act on every desire to integrate it. But you do need to acknowledge it exists. You need to be honest about what you feel. You need to explore what the desire is really about. Not just the surface attraction, but the symbolic meaning, the psychological need, the disowned part of yourself seeking expression. When you can sit with desire without shame, without immediately acting on it or pushing it away, something changes. The energy becomes available. You're no longer spending all your power managing the shadow. You can actually use that energy for growth, creativity, genuine connection. The spiritual path Jung outlined isn't about becoming less human. It's about becoming more conscious. And you can't become conscious of what you refuse to look at. So if you've been trying to meditate your way out of desire, fast your way out of attraction, or pray your way into purity, this is your sign to stop. Not because those practices are wrong, but because they're incomplete without shadow work. Real spirituality includes the body. Real wholeness includes desire. Real enlightenment isn't the absence of lust, it's the conscious relationship with it, and that's where the real transformation begins. So we've established that denying lust doesn't work. But what does integration actually look like? How do you work with this energy in a way that's neither repressive nor indulgent? This is where Jung's concept of psychological alchemy becomes essential. Jung spent years studying medieval alchemical texts, and he came to a startling conclusion. The alchemists weren't just primitive chemists. They were describing the process of psychological transformation using chemical metaphors. The real gold they were creating wasn't a metal. It was consciousness itself. And the process always started with the prima materia, the raw base, impure material. In psychological terms, that's the shadow. That's lust, anger, fear, shame, all the parts you've been taught to reject. The alchemical process Jung described has several stages, but the key insight is this: you can't skip steps. You have to start with what's dark, heavy, and earthly, before you can create something refined and conscious. This is the exact opposite of how most spiritual traditions approach desire. Let's break down what integration actually means in practice. First, acknowledgement without judgment. This is harder than it sounds. It means noticing desire when it arises and simply naming it. I'm feeling attraction. I'm having sexual thoughts. I'm experiencing longing. Not I'm bad for feeling this, or I need to act on this immediately. Just honest recognition. Jung would call this bringing the unconscious into consciousness. The moment you can observe a desire without being completely identified with it, you've created space. You're no longer the desire. You're the one aware of the desire. That's the beginning of freedom. Second, curiosity about meaning. Here's where Jung's approach gets really interesting. He believed that every psychological experience has both a literal and a symbolic dimension. Yes, sexual attraction can be about wanting physical intimacy with another person, but it's often also about something deeper. Ask yourself, what quality does this person embody that I'm drawn to? Confidence, freedom, creativity, wildness? Often, the intense attraction you feel is your psyche showing you a disowned part of yourself, a quality you need to develop, a part of your personality you've repressed, an aspect of your potential you haven't claimed. Jung called this projection. We project our unconscious contents onto others, and then we're mysteriously drawn to them. Integration means taking back those projections. Instead of seeking those qualities in someone else, you develop them in yourself. Third, symbolic expression. This is where alchemy and creativity intersect. The energy of lust doesn't have to be expressed literally through sexual behavior. It can be channeled into creative work, artistic expression, passionate projects. This isn't repression, it's transformation. Jung noticed that many of his most creative clients experienced their breakthrough work after learning to consciously relate to their sexual energy. Not by denying it, but by recognizing it as life force that could flow in multiple directions. The same energy that drives sexual desire also drives creative genius, spiritual longing, and the urge to bring new things into the world. This is what spiritual traditions mean by transmutation, but they often get it wrong. Real transmutation isn't about killing desire. It's about recognizing the energy beneath desire and choosing consciously how to direct it. Fourth, relationship with tension. Here's an uncomfortable truth Jung understood. Growth happens in the tension between opposites, between spirit and body, between desire and restraint, between impulse and consciousness. The goal isn't to resolve that tension by choosing one side. It's to hold both. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold paradox and create something new from the tension. When you can feel desire and not immediately act on it. When you can honor your spiritual values and still acknowledge your human hungers. When you can be both body and soul. That's where transformation happens. This is why quick fixes don't work. Whether it's strict celibacy or unrestricted indulgence, any approach that tries to eliminate tension is missing the point. The tension is the teacher. The discomfort is the crucible where consciousness is forged. Fifth, embodied wholeness. The endpoint of integration isn't some transcendent state where you no longer feel desire. It's a grounded wholeness where you feel desire and 1,000 other things, and you're conscious of all of it. You're not controlled by lust, but you're not at war with it either, Jung wrote. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is it. This is the path. Not up and out of the body, but down and through, into the mess, the contradiction, the disowned parts of yourself. When you integrate lust, something remarkable happens. It stops having so much power over you. The obsessive quality fades. The shame dissolves. You can feel attraction without being hijacked by it. You can have desires without becoming your desires. And here's the beautiful paradox. Only when you stop fighting lust does it transform into something else. Into vitality, creativity, genuine connection, conscious choice. This is the alchemical gold Jung was talking about. Not the absence of desire, but the transformation of unconscious compulsion into conscious energy. Not purity, but wholeness. Not transcendence, but integration. And that changes everything. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt the tension between your spiritual path and your human desires? Drop a comment below. because your experience matters. So where does this leave us? If Jung is right, if lust isn't something to conquer but something to integrate, what does that actually look like in a real human life? Because here's the thing, understanding this intellectually is one thing. Living it is another. The path Jung outlined isn't easy. It requires radical honesty with yourself. It requires sitting with discomfort. It requires giving up the fantasy that you'll one day be above all this, that you'll transcend your human nature and finally be pure, perfect, untouched by desire. That fantasy is itself a trap. It's the ego's way of staying in control, of avoiding the messy, humbling work of actually becoming whole. Real integration looks less like perfection and more like awareness. It's noticing when desire arises and not panicking. It's feeling attraction without immediately building a fantasy or drowning in shame. It's recognizing projection. This person has qualities I need to develop in myself, and doing the work to reclaim what you've disowned. It means having conversations about sexuality and spirituality that are honest, nuanced, and mature. Not the black and white thinking of lust is sin or anything goes, but the complex adult recognition that we are creatures of both earth and spirit, body and soul, desire and consciousness. Jung believed that the second half of life, typically starting around midlife, is when this integration becomes most urgent. The first half of life is about building an identity, achieving goals, fitting into society. But the second half is about individuation, becoming who you actually are, not who you were told to be. And individuation requires shadow work. It requires facing everything you've kept in the dark, including your sexuality, your desires, your lusty, hungry, embodied humanity. For many people, this is when the crisis hits. The spiritual seeker who's been meditating for decades suddenly feels flooded with desire. The religious person who followed all the rules starts questioning everything. The person who built their identity on being good discovers they have impulses that don't fit the script. This isn't a failure. Jung would say this is the psyche's way of demanding wholeness. It's the unconscious saying, you can't ignore this anymore. So what do? You start by telling the truth, to yourself at least. You acknowledge what you feel. You get curious about what it means. You find safe spaces to explore these questions without judgment. Maybe that's therapy. Maybe that's journaling. Maybe that's trusted friends who can hold space for the real you, not just the persona. You practice holding the tension between your spiritual values and your human experience. You stop making it an either-or. You can meditate in the morning and feel desire in the afternoon. You can pray for guidance and still be attracted to someone. You can be devoted to growth and still be imperfectly, messily human. You channel the energy consciously. When you feel that surge of life force, whether it shows up as sexual desire, creative hunger, or spiritual longing, you recognize it as the same fundamental energy. And you choose, consciously, how to direct it. Sometimes that means creative work. Sometimes that means physical intimacy within the bounds of your values. Sometimes that means just sitting with the energy and letting it teach you something about yourself. Most importantly, you give up shame. Not because shame serves no purpose. It can be a useful signal, but because chronic shame keeps you fragmented. It keeps you at war with yourself. And a house divided cannot stand. Jung's vision of spirituality is ultimately about peace. Not the peace of having no desires, but the peace of being at home in your whole self. The peace of no longer needing to perform purity. The peace of accepting that you are human, and that being human includes desire, and that desire is not the enemy of the divine. It's one of its expressions. This is the untold truth that nobody wants to hear because it's not clean, it's not simple, and it doesn't give you easy rules to follow. But it's real, and it works. When you stop fighting lust and start integrating it, you don't become less spiritual, you become more whole. And wholeness is what true spirituality has always been about. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, practice simple awareness. When desire arises, whether it's sexual, emotional, or creative, just notice it. Don't judge it, don't act on it, don't push it away. Just observe it with curiosity. What is this energy? What is it trying to tell me? What disowned part of myself is seeking expression? And if this video resonated with you, If Jung's wisdom speaks to something you've been struggling with, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because this conversation about lust, spirituality, and what it really means to be whole is one we need to be having more openly, more honestly, and with more compassion. The path to wholeness doesn't go around your humanity. It goes straight through it. And that's where the real transformation lives.